For more than 10 years now, Left 4 Dead fans have been craving a new game, and in typical Valve fashion, they have decided not to release a third entry into the franchise, instead opting to release patches for Left 4 Dead 2 and a more notable DLC with The Last Stand, which was the biggest update added to the game since Coldstream all those years ago. Now, although people can agree that Left 4 Dead 2 is still as great as it was when it first released, with its endearing characters, timeless gameplay, and great level design, we are all still wanting a newer title to release, no matter how unrealistic that dream might be, knowing Valve. Luckily, Turtle Rock Studios have taken it upon themselves to scratch that itch Left 4 Dead fans have had all these years with a new title that definitely follows the same beats as their original attempt, you know, right before they sold the rights to Valve. But then again, who better to take the torch and carry on the legacy? Turtle Rock Studios hasn't seen much action in the video game industry for a good few years now. Since their work on the original Left 4 Dead, the only other notable game they have crafted is Evolve, and yeah, that wasn't the greatest. With this lack of experience, will this affect the quality of Back 4 Blood? Early trailers for the game showed promise, and people quickly began to notice the similarities Back 4 Blood and Left 4 Dead had. 4-player co-op, special infected, and of course the biggest similarity, they both have 4 in the name. Fun fact, Turtle Rock blessed the community with 2 betas, an open one and a closed beta, giving people a chance to play the game and have a feel of what to expect when the full game drops in October of this year. The beta gave us a taste of 2 campaigns we can expect to see in the game, and 4v4 multiplayer. To be honest, I was surprised at how much we actually got in the beta. It was very generous with what we had access to. I mean, before going in, I thought we were only going to get a few chapters of a campaign and maybe a multiplayer game mode, so that was a huge positive for me. Now, a lot of people who love Left 4 Dead, like myself, are always skeptical when a developer tries to replicate the same formula. I would say copy, but I don't think that's really fair, as developers are allowed to try their own take on a genre. Over the years, we have seen countless attempts from devs to capture the magic Left 4 Dead brought us, and some of these do end up being praised and successful, and others end up just being forgotten after a few weeks, thanks to a lack of personality, originality, and blatant laziness, just trying to ride off the success Left 4 Dead had. So, after finally trying a slice of Back 4 Blood, is it going to be one of these cheap knockoffs, or will it be the perfect successor? Characters in video games are arguably one of the most important aspects of making that game a success. Great characters help invest the player and bring the world of the game to life, even becoming more famous than the game they originated from in the first place, in some cases. Characters need to be interesting in order for the player to be interested in them. This doesn't mean they need complex backstories or in-depth lore, they just need defining personalities that make them special and not just another body taking up pixels on your screen. Valve has a reputation of making iconic characters, with many notable ones including Gordon Freeman, GLaDOS, any of the mercenaries from TF2, and of course, who can forget Stocking Head Terrorist from Counter-Strike Global Offensive. The Left 4 Dead franchise continued this trend, giving us some of the most iconic characters that are still recognised today. This aspect of Left 4 Dead is what keeps this franchise so relevant. The chemistry between these groups of characters and their cheesy yet endearing dialogue helps make the games that much more enjoyable. All of their personalities aim to fit a different role. You have the level-headed ones, the positive ones, the funny ones, and the cynical ones. All blend well with one another, and they make you care for them. My 2 favourite survivors personally are of course Ellis and Coach, the iconic duo from Left 4 Dead 2. I just love their chemistry and the laughs these 2 bring throughout the game, and I also think these 2 are the main reason why the second game feels a lot lighter in tone than the first.
Hey, Whispering Oaks! Shit, I used to go there when I was a kid.
They also make the experience a lot less harrowing and much more entertaining. In a country where hundreds of infected rush you every other minute, it makes the situation a lot nicer hearing these characters talk about other mundane things with each other, reminding you that these are just regular folks trying to survive. It also gives these games somewhat of a comedic undertone, almost like the games acknowledge just how ridiculous they are.
That man's a stock car legend.
I'm getting sick of looking at this guy's face.
Well, trust me, in these parts, he's as famous as Elvis. Or the president.
That man is America's greatest natural resource.
This is why so many of these Left 4 Dead copies fail in my opinion, as the characters just aren't entertaining or gripping to play or listen to. A lack of backstory is no excuse, as the Left 4 Dead cast managed to be great characters without having their backstories revealed completely. Most of these games just can't break through that ceiling that turns a mediocre character into a great character. With this in mind, does Back 4 Blood follow this bad trend? Well, it's hard to say right now because we haven't really had much time time to really get invested in these characters. But to me, and this might just be me, they aren't really that special. Again, this doesn't mean the game is bad in any way, but to me characters are a big factor in making these games so great and memorable. And thinking about it right now, no joke, I can't remember the names of most of the characters. Honestly, I don't know if that's just my bad memory or the fact that these characters are just that forgettable. The two characters I do remember are Walker, only because he's voiced by the same guy who voices Jax in Mortal Kombat 11, and Mom, just because that's a terrible name for a character. There's nothing particularly wrong with these characters, but equally there's nothing that makes them stand out. Whereas the cast of Left 4 Dead felt like characters in a video game, you know, with their exaggerated personalities and great voice lines. These characters don't feel unique at all, and honestly only have a tiny bit more life in them than the actual ridden zombies in the game. I know this is just a beta, but the dialogue we've heard so far points to the fact that there's probably not going to be anything special about them in the final game. Nothing the characters really say defines their personalities. They just seem to fill stereotypes. And I know you could say that about the Left 4 Dead characters being just stereotypes. And although that may be true, they are not defined solely by these stereotypes, whereas these characters are, it seems. And the dialogue is a major factor in this. Maybe it's just the nostalgia, but the dialogue in Left 4 Dead is so memorable. Each character has at least a few lines of dialogue fans can recite.
Holy shit, guys! It's goddamn Kittyland!
The characters don't only talk to each other, but also interact with what's going on around them, calling out things in the environment, and when they encounter special infected. The characters in Back 4 Blood do interact with one another, but it just feels disjointed and unnatural. None of the characters feel like they are actually talking amongst themselves, because the dialogue between them doesn't feel unique besides from the characters calling the person's name they are speaking to. Almost like the devs knew the player won't know who is talking to who unless the character shouts the other's name before every conversation. Although Left 4 Dead did do this from time to time, the characters also had nicknames for each other and had their own friendships within their groups, but maybe that's just me overthinking and it's just a nitpick. When describing the gameplay of Left 4 Dead, the same points always crop up: fast-paced, addictive, and fluid. One of the major factors that makes these games so special is how every playthrough is never the same. The places the common and special infected spawn are all determined randomly, and by how well or poorly your performance has been so far. This makes the game unpredictable, no matter how many times you've played it. That's what makes them so great.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Back 4 Blood also seems to be like this, as having played through the campaigns a couple of times, although it's not very noticeable, there are some changes. One of course being that special infected won't always spawn in the same places. This is a positive for the game, as hopefully it will be enough to keep the gameplay varied. Another way the game is trying to keep gameplay fresh is with the inclusion of one of the biggest changes from Left 4 Dead, which is the inclusion of cards. These cards offer small perks to the player that contribute to different playstyles. Some revolve around health, some ammo, and other more specific perks that help you in different situations. My favourite so far is probably the knife that replaces the standard melee hit, as it lets you deal with common infected or ridden quickly. They don't seem to make drastic changes to the character, but nonetheless this is a step in the right direction in making the game feel varied. How they will make these cards available to the players, I'm still unaware. Maybe you have to level up, or maybe they will be included in the game's battle pass. As well as this element of randomness that kept Left 4 Dead so exciting, many can agree that the games were also very, in classic Valve fashion, there isn't a sprint button, so the characters just naturally run pretty quick. This is again a great way of keeping the gameplay engaging, as typically in most other first-person shooters, all the players' actions are interrupted by sprinting, as it normally requires the player to stop what they're doing, which arguably slows the gameplay down. As you can tell by that statement, I'm not really a huge fan of sprint in games like Halo, but you know, that's a discussion for another day. So this system in Left 4 Dead keeps the action flowing and the pace brisk, as the player can run and shoot at the same time. This choice makes a lot of sense considering the amount of enemies you have to fight that are constantly surrounding you, so letting you run and shoot is very effective at keeping the odds even. A great implementation that adds so much to the series. Despite Left 4 Dead being the trendsetter for these types of games, not many of them surprisingly share this feature, as most would rather use a generic sprint mechanic that stops the player from shooting. Unfortunately, Back 4 Blood's sprint system is one of the dullest I've seen. The player is given a stamina bar that begins to run down when they sprint or use a melee attack. then slowly recharges when they walk or come to a complete standstill. This makes the gameplay a lot more slower than that of Left 4 Dead, as there are many instances where the player has to slow down, bringing the intensity to a complete stop. This, as expected, affects combat, as due to the fact that the player is often moving slowly, the Ridden also seem to move a lot slower than the common infected from Left 4 Dead, making certain levels drag. It's not major, but you can definitely feel the difference. It just makes the gameplay that little less interesting when you just slowly slog your way through these maps. And it's also very frustrating, as you want to run at full pelt, guns blazing, but are held back by limitations the game has imposed on itself. I guess it was implemented to make weapons feel balanced, so you can't just swing a baseball bat or machete forever, but it just hinders the overall experience. It wouldn't be that big of an issue, but the stamina bar takes forever to fully recharge, which is incredibly frustrating when you have to stop every 10 strides while you've got a horde of Ridden biting at your ankles. This kind of puts people off using melee weapons, as they just drain your stamina so much they become a hindrance rather than helpful, leading people to only use pistols from what I've seen, and who can blame them? Melee weapons were a great new feature brought into Left 4 Dead 2, and they offered up some of the most satisfying combat in the game. In order to further understand the gameplay of Back 4 Blood, I need to talk about the enemies you face in the game. The Ridden, aka this universe's version of the green flu infected we saw in Left 4 Dead. These are the monsters you will fight throughout your time in Back 4 Blood, and before we talk about them, we of course have to talk about their inspiration. The common infected in Left 4 Dead are nothing special, hence the name common infected. Just standard looking individuals who have fallen to the infection, who are now fueled by rage and a desire to kill any uninfected people, but there's a lot of them. Each level in both games will have hundreds of them constantly running towards you, and although they are weak, going down with a bullet or two, or even a swing from a melee weapon, it's not wise to underestimate them, as they can easily kill you in large numbers. Left 4 Dead 2 decided to mix things up a little by adding uncommon infected to their campaigns. Again, pretty standard looking, except they had special attributes unique to them. Hazmat infected are immune to fire, mudmen cover your screen in mud, and riot infected are immune to bullets, making players take that little extra care when trying to blast their way through hordes. In Back 4 Blood, the common Ridden don't have nearly enough impact as they should do. Referring back to my previous point of them being slow, they aren't that intimidating, and it rarely feels like you're gonna get overwhelmed by them. There's never really enough on screen to make you feel in danger, which is a problem. I'm not saying they're not fun to fight, because of course there were times where I got caught out by them after being too cocky, but these moments just aren't frequent enough. It's not like this can be helped by a difficulty change, as no matter what difficulty you play, you should always be able to fight waves upon waves of infected. This leaves a lot of spaces in these levels feeling empty, and sometimes you spend more time walking than actually fighting. The common infected obviously are not the most memorable enemies in Left 4 Dead. That achievement goes to the special infected. These enemies are the real threat to your survival, as they can turn the tide of the fight, easily slowing you and your team down and potentially killing you if you're not extremely careful. Each special infected has a different job to carry out in order to incapacitate survivors. Two of the hardest special infected to overcome are of course the Tank and the Witch, extremely deadly enemies that require care and teamwork to either kill or avoid. The special infected arguably are almost as recognised as the characters of Left 4 Dead, as their appearances are incredibly unique. As expected, Back 4 Blood has its own special infected to make the gameplay more interesting. Although there are more to come with the full game, I'm just going to be talking about the ones featured in the beta, as it would be unfair to comment on something I haven't played or seen yet. A lot of the designs of the special Ridden are pretty cool, I must say. I know typically with these games, many devs try either too hard or too little when it comes to special zombies, but Turtle Rock has definitely done a good job with these. I think out of all of them, my favourite so far has got to be the Hocker. With Back 4 Blood, the special Ridden are assigned in classes, with similar Ridden being placed in the same one. This class system seems to revolve around body type and shape. For example, the Exploder and Wretch are both huge, slow-moving Ridden that both operate to either explode on the enemy dealing damage, or spit acid at them. In Left 4 Dead, the special infected had a straightforward purpose. Hunters, smokers and chargers would immobilise survivors, allowing common and other special infected to deal extra damage to them. Jockeys could drag survivors, perhaps pulling them into another infected projectile, and boomers and spitters would shoot said projectiles via their mouths. And of course the Tank was the huge damage dealer. It seems with Back 4 Blood, the special Ridden take on attributes and inspiration from a multitude of different special infected from Left 4 Dead, as the Wretch is bloated and fragile like a boomer, but also has the acidic spit of the Spitter too. The Tall Boys again seem to have a lot more inspiration from the Charger, mainly being used to plough through survivors' defences and pinning them to the floor. The special Ridden that caught my attention the most, however, was definitely the Ogre. The Ogre is unlike anything from Left 4 Dead, as it is clearly much bigger than the Tank. The Ogre seems to be used as a boss encounter, which is highlighted by its health bar appearing at the top of the player's screen. screen. Another ridden type I found really interesting was the wall zombie looking things. These ridden appear to be glued to surfaces, and when a player gets too close they jump at them and pin them to the floor. Although these ridden types are fun to fight, it felt like they were never really present. I know special infected aren't supposed to be that frequent, but this felt even less frequent than it was in Left 4 Dead, as sometimes 5 minutes will pass without seeing one of these monsters, which is even more obvious given the fact that there isn't usually that many common ridden either. That was the major issue I got from playing the beta of this game: emptiness. This can easily be fixed in the final game. Just fill areas with a load more bodies and watch the carnage ensue. Of course you can't fight the ridden with your bare hands. Well, you can, but it's really not advised. That's why you need a big gun to kill them. The guns in Left 4 Dead were pretty standard. Assault rifles, shotguns and snipers made up the majority of your arsenal, as well as pipe bombs, molotovs and bile bombs being used as throwable grenades. Back 4 Blood has introduced a customization aspect to the primary weapons of the game. This lets players purchase attachments like sights and magazines. These can be bought at store boxes found in safe rooms, which, as well as weapon attachments, players can also buy grenades, healing items and even other weapons. These are bought with copper, one of the game's currencies. This addition to Back 4 Blood is one of the best in my opinion, as again, like the cards, it adds more variety to a concept that could be a bit repetitive if not done properly. As well as these store boxes, supply boxes can also be found around each level, providing ammo and medical items. However, don't worry yourself too much about not finding ammo, there's not a lot of ridden to shoot at anyway. Great map design is another highlight from both Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Each campaign was given its own traits and style that helped the world feel varied and kept the player interested through its visuals. The scenery, the atmosphere, left its footprints fixed to the player's mind, creating both a creepy and charming feeling. Everyone who has played these games knows what I'm talking about. There's just something so special about some of these levels and the overall look of them that's just amazing. Everyone has their favourite campaigns that they hold above the rest, mine being Dark Carnival and The Perish. Each level sees the survivors traverse through a number of obstacles to get from one safe room to another, moving through buildings, towns, sewers, fields, pretty much every terrain imaginable. Although graphically the visuals are lacking nowadays, Left 4 Dead's design is so memorable thanks to its visual storytelling environments. Mercy Hospital, the Carnival and the Sugar Mill. Simple concepts, but thanks to their creative designs, they keep the player gripped in both the story and gameplay. Each campaign is in a sense its own self-contained story, which gave Valve the freedom to try some of the weirder scenarios survivors may find themselves in during a zombie apocalypse. While Left 4 Dead 1 was not too experimental with its design, as most of the maps were shrouded in darkness, Left 4 Dead 1 upped its game arguably in terms of visual design, with levels taking place during different times of the day and in different weather conditions. Each level was not a straightforward line from A to B, as they contained a plethora of areas the player could freely explore, searching for supplies, which made these games feel unrestricted. We've not seen the extent of Back 4 Blood's variety in terms of level design and setting, so this is going to focus on the beta maps. To be honest, nothing about the two campaigns really set themselves apart from each other. Let's get past the obvious first. Both share a similar dark, gritty theme, with the sky being pretty cloudy and gloomy. This definitely feels reminiscent of Left 4 Dead 1 with the suburban aesthetic. In fact, there seems to be many callbacks to Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 found in these campaigns. The gameplay has had a massive effect on the map design because of course needing to search for supplies means they need to be hidden somewhere to make it somewhat challenging, which is why in Left 4 Dead many weapons and other items are hidden in rooms and behind objects. However, implementing it in Back 4 Blood isn't really that necessary because, like I mentioned, the player can purchase ammo, health and upgrades at the beginning of each level with copper that is pretty easy to find. What I did love about the map designs themselves was the interactivity that players had on the environment, flipping switches, exploding barrels and completing side objectives to complete the main objective. This was a great addition that I loved about Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, as it makes your actions feel like they affect the game itself significantly. What I really don't like about these maps, however, is how repetitive they feel. For me, almost everything blends together, and there aren't enough locations that feel that great besides the two finale levels and the farm, as they were some of the only parts that had character, and also were probably the funnest parts of the game. Maybe also the church location, even if it did feel a little too close to Left 4 Dead. There's not much here that screams originality, which is a shame and a problem that hopefully is not present when the full game arrives. Speaking of the finales of the two campaigns, they both vary greatly in quality. The bridge/boat finale was 100% the best for me, as it offered some tense moments like having to venture back onto the boat to arm bombs. I mean, I probably enjoyed it so much because the Perish finale is my favourite out of the Left 4 Dead 2 campaigns. The sheer amount of infected the game throws at you. It's hard to really go into detail about the other finale because, well, frankly, for me, it was broken. Unless the devs purposefully had you loading up a missile launcher without any Ridden attacking you, and if that's the case, they nailed it. Left 4 Dead multiplayer was a huge selling point for the game. Many people usually think about the co-op side of the games though mainly, rightfully so, as the Left 4 Dead games are for me some of the best co-op experiences in gaming, but this aspect sometimes overshadows the great PvP game modes included within the games. What's so great about this feature is that it allows players to control special infected, which showcase some unique gameplay features like leaping, spitting, and fisting, hitting. This is both challenging and rewarding, as although at first new players will struggle to utilise special infected properly, once learned it can lead to some satisfying moments. The main and most popular multiplayer mode has two teams taking it in turns to play as both the survivors and infected through a campaign, and whichever team gets the furthest wins the match. There are other game modes like Scavenger, but this one is arguably the best. Back 4 Blood also has PvP multiplayer, which we also got a taste of in the beta. The game mode we got was a lot different to what I was expecting, as it still has two teams taking it in turns to play as survivors and Ridden. However, rather than play through a campaign, the teams play on a small map that they have to try and survive longer than the other team to win. Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of these small maps. Although they were pretty fun when playing as the survivors, they felt a little unfair when playing as Ridden, as there were very few places Ridden could hide and surprise the survivors. Again, they felt pretty standard, and although small, they were too empty yet again, lacking any defining features. Playing as the Ridden also felt similar to their Left 4 Dead cousins, so it would have been nice to have more unique Ridden ideas. Again, the full game isn't out yet, so there's still hope they will change this. Back 4 Blood has a lot of promise, but also has a lot of issues. Gameplay doesn't feel as energetic and chaotic as Left 4 Dead, and although some aspects are exciting, nothing seems to jump out at you. I know I've slated the beta for a lot of this video, but that's because I care. I care that this game has issues, I care that the characters aren't that charismatic, and I care about this game. I want nothing more than this game to succeed. Seeing so many relieved and satisfied fans of Left 4 Dead accept this game as one of their own would just be amazing. If the success of this game is out of this world, then who knows, maybe that will open the doors of possibility for Valve to step through and reclaim their torch.